Welcome to Reflect with Ed Fazio. Get ready to experience one of the world's first 100% digitally generated podcasts, where we take a step back, dive deep, and strive to learn new things. Join us as we unpack thought-provoking ideas, personal reflections, and inspiring stories to help you stay in the know. Reflect is brought to you by the minds at ByteBrain and powered by emerging technologies from Google, HeyGen, OpenAI, and 11 Labs. Thanks for tuning in. Now, relax and prepare to reflect.
Welcome to Reflect, one of the world's first 100% AI-generated podcasts. And a massive welcome to you, the listener. If you are a senior corporate leader and executive, or frankly just someone steering a massive organization through the choppy waters of change, you are in exactly the right place today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to this one.
Me too. Because today we are setting up a deeply compelling, somewhat provocative deep dive. We've pulled together this fascinating stack of sources. I mean, we've got everything from deep psychological anthropology, like this wild essay on the Eden myth, to heavy-hitting white papers on corporate governance, and a really practical 10-point guide on responsible AI.
Right, and the mission here really is to build a prescriptive framework for enterprise change management. Because the reality of enterprise change today, it requires a completely radical new mindset.
Exactly, especially when we were talking about large-scale AI adoption, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the technical side. I mean, honestly, the technical side is almost the easy part now. The real challenge, the part that keeps you awake at night as an executive, is handling the psychological and human impacts of rolling out these systems across, tens of thousands of employees.
Let's get right into that, because the core argument we're looking at today from our sources is that AI rollouts aren't failing because of bad code or poor integration.
No, not at all.
They're failing because of basic human panic.
Yes.
And to fix this, leaders like you listening right now, you have to understand some incredibly ancient tribal survival software that is just constantly running in the background of your employees' minds.
It really comes down to boundaries. Yeah. You have to set operational boundaries that don't destroy psychological safety. And then you have to figure out how to take these abstract ethical ideas and turn them into hard, measurable governance.
Right.
Because if you fail at the psychology, the technology just doesn't matter. It will fail.
I want to start with that psychology.
Yes.
Because one of the materials we're diving into today takes a really unexpected angle. It analyzes the myth of Eden. Yeah, the biblical Garden of Eden, yes. But strictly as a psychological and anthropological case study. It's not theology here. It frames that story as the ultimate lesson in boundaries, belonging, and really the birth of the phrase, that's not how we do it here.
It's such a brilliant way to look at human behavior. So the philosopher Bernardo Kastrup, he suggests that the fall in Eden wasn't a moral failing at all. It was a psychological one.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
So it represents the birth of self-awareness and separation. Before they ate the fruit, there was this undifferentiated unity. They were just part of the environment, totally secure, no anxiety.
Right, just existing.
Exactly. But after the fruit, suddenly there is dualism. There is me and you. There is self-consciousness, exposure, and most importantly, evaluation. The ego wakes up and immediately starts looking around to see if it's safe.
And the immediate result of that self-awareness in the story is noticing they were naked.
Right.
Shame enters the equation. But, okay, to bring this into the boardroom for our listener, why does a senior leader who's just trying to deploy a massive tech initiative, why do they need to care about the psychology of Eden?
Because the expulsion from Eden is essentially the first recorded ostracism event. And ostracism is the biggest hidden threat to your organization.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. There's this researcher, Kipling Williams, who has spent his entire career studying social exclusion. And his work shows that being ostracized isn't just, a minor workplace annoyance. It is a primal alarm.
A primal alarm.
Yes. It reliably threatens 4 core human needs: belonging, self-esteem, control, and meaningful existence.
If you strip away all the corporate bullshit, exclusion feels like scraping your bones. It is devastating on a human level.
It really is.
And this maps directly onto the panic we are seeing with AI adoption right now across these enterprises.
Consider what happens when AI is rolled out clumsily, like without clear communication. Employees look at this new technology and they immediately feel the threat of replacement. And what is replacement, really? It is just the corporate word for exclusion. It means being kicked out of the tribe.
That's such a good point.
And when that primal alarm goes off, people don't calmly log into a learning portal to, update their skills.
No, they go straight into survival mode.
Precisely. They hide mistakes. They engage in quiet, passive-aggressive resistance. They start pointing fingers at other departments. Everything grinds to a halt.
There's this sports coach analogy from the sources that perfectly captures this. Imagine an NFL team brings in a new head coach to turn the franchise around.
Okay?
If the players believe this coach is only there to ruthlessly cut half the roster, what happens?
They panic.
Exactly. They stop taking risks. They stop trying new plays. They just try to survive the practice without getting noticed. If your workforce thinks the new AI initiative is that head coach, your adoption is dead on arrival.
And that brings us to the concept of psychological safety. It's a bit of a buzzword, I know, but in this context, it's a tangible operational requirement. Just look at how AT&T handled their future-ready strategy.
Oh, this is a great case study.
Yeah. They were looking down the barrel of massive tech disruption and realized they had catastrophic skill gaps across their entire workforce.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second. If I'm a CEO, right, and I stand up at a town hall and say, hey, everyone, half of the skills in this room are about to be obsolete, aren't I just triggering that exact primal panic we just talked about? How did AT&T prevent a mass exodus?
Well, because they didn't just point at the gap and say, good luck. They told the unvarnished truth about the disruption, yes, but they paired it with massive funding for retraining and internal mobility.
They put their money where their mouth was.
Exactly. They built a bridge. They communicated, essentially. The world is changing. The boundaries of what we do are shifting, but you belong in this tribe, and here is exactly how we are going to get you across.
They maintained the belonging while shifting the boundaries. That's a really crucial distinction, because boundaries themselves aren't the enemy here. Every cohesive culture needs to be able to say, that's not how we do it here.
Absolutely. Boundaries are the infrastructure of a community. Without them, you don't have a culture, you just have a crowd. Modern phenomena like cancel culture or even just workplace ostracism are really just ancient tribal enforcement mechanisms operating on Wi-Fi.
Operating on Wi-Fi, that's a great way to put it.
The human nervous system hasn't updated in 50,000 years, right? Even if our software has.
So as an executive, you have to set hard boundaries to protect the enterprise from the very real risks of AI. We all know that. But how do you do that without making everyone feel like they're walking on eggshells? How do you avoid triggering that primal panic?
You have to define explicit risk tiers. You cannot manage all AI usage with a single sweeping policy. It just creates way too much friction.
Makes sense.
A highly practical framework for this from the 10-point guide we read uses a medical analogy. You categorize use cases into vitamins, prescriptions, and surgeries.
Okay, I love this. Let's break that down. Walk me through a vitamin.
So a vitamin is a low-risk application. It's meant for enhancement. For example, your marketing team using a generative AI tool to brainstorm campaign slogans or maybe draft a few social media posts.
Right.
If the AI hallucinates, meaning it just confidently makes up a fact, or if it generates a typo, the harm to the company is incredibly low. You catch it, you fix it. It's a vitamin. You don't need a board committee to approve it.
Got it. It's just a daily supplement to your work.
So what pushes a use case into the prescription tier?
Prescriptions carry higher risk and they require controlled access. Think of your HR department wanting to use an AI model to screen thousands of incoming resumes.
Oh, yeah. That's getting tricky.
Very.
Yeah.
Now you are dealing with people's livelihoods, the potential for algorithmic bias, heavy regulatory scrutiny. You need strict guardrails, proper dosage, and professional oversight, just like a prescription drug.
And surgery. That's the highest tier.
Surgery is the absolute highest risk category where failure is catastrophic. Imagine your legal department using an AI tool to summarize binding corporate contracts or parse out liability clauses, generating compliance reports, stuff like that.
Exactly. A hallucination in that environment could cost the company millions in lawsuits or regulatory fines. That is surgery. You need the most rigorous boundaries, absolute precision, and a human in the loop.
Meaning someone actually checking the work.
Right. A qualified human expert must review and approve the output before any action is taken.
I really like how that clarifies things for the organization. It gives everyone a shared language. But setting the rules is really only half the battle. How do you actually enforce them? Because if I catch an employee using an unapproved AI plugin to, I don't know, write client emails, and I immediately fire them to make an example of just weaponized exclusion, doesn't that throw everyone right back into panic mode?
Yes, it does. And worse, It drives the behavior underground. That's where the concept of proportional enforcement comes in. Think about traffic enforcement.
Okay.
If someone goes 3 miles over the speed limit and you immediately throw them in jail, you don't actually make the roads safer. You just teach the entire population to buy radar detectors and hide their actions.
Ah, right. The classic shadow IT problem. Employees just take their work to their personal devices, use an unapproved public AI, and hide it from the company. It becomes a hell of a mess to clean up.
Exactly. You need proportional enforcement paired with due process. Look at Meta's oversight board. Regardless of how anyone feels about their specific content moderation decisions, the architectural design is what matters here.
What did they do right?
They created a large-scale, accountable review body with a clear public path for appeals. They avoided silent, draconian enforcement. When the tribe knows there is a transparent process, the panic decreases.
But let's look at the flip side. What happens when an enterprise fails to set those boundaries and enforce that operational risk? There is a massive case study in our sources here with the Zillow offers disaster.
Yeah, that is one of the most profound illustrations of boundary failure in modern corporate history. Zillow relied heavily on automated, algorithmic models to forecast home prices and literally buy houses at scale.
And for a while, it worked, right? They were flipping houses.
Yeah.
But then the pandemic hit. The housing market shifted in unprecedented ways, and the models didn't know how to adapt. They just kept buying.
Because models fail in the wild when the environment changes. Setting boundaries isn't just about controlling employee behavior, it's about controlling the technology itself. Continuous monitoring and the willingness and the ability to shut down a failing system are the ultimate tests of responsible governance.
And Zillow couldn't do that.
Zillow trusted the algorithm way too much. They lacked the necessary human-in-the-loop oversight to hit the brakes, and they took massive, massive losses. If you can't turn the system off, you don't own it. It owns you.
Wow. That reminds me of the Microsoft Tay chatbot incident from a few years back. They released this experimental AI on social media, and within hours, users manipulated it into echoing incredibly toxic, offensive language. It was a complete PR nightmare.
It was. But the operational success in that story, if we can call it a success, was Microsoft's rapid rollback procedure. They had the boundary awareness to recognize a catastrophic failure and pull the plug immediately. They had an off switch, and they used it.
Which is a perfect segue into how organizations actually build these off switches. I mean, we hear a lot of companies publishing these grand, sweeping statements about ethical AI.
Yeah.
But just saying we should be careful isn't a strategy, is it?
Not at all. It's just a sentiment. It is the trap of vague commitments. Look at Google's trajectory here. Back in 2018, they published their initial AI principles, abstract commitments about avoiding unfair bias and building for safety.
Sounds it on paper.
Sure, but by 2025, they had to heavily update and operationalize those principles. Why? Because principles are only durable if you have tangible governance and actual incentives to enforce them.
It's the kitchen rules analogy, right?
Yes, exactly.
You can hang a sign in the corporate break room that says, be respectful of the space. But if no one actually agrees on the hard rules, like clean your dishes immediately, label your leftovers, and don't microwave foosh, the kitchen just descends into chaos.
Right. And translating be respectful into a repeatable operating system is the heavy lifting of enterprise change management. Microsoft's sensitive uses approach is widely considered the gold standard here. They didn't just tell their developers to be careful, they built specialized mandatory review workflows.
So how does that actually function day to day for a developer?
Well, if a team wants to build or deploy something that hits certain high-risk criteria, they can't just push the code. They are forced through a structured impact assessment template. This surfaces potential risks about safety harms, data privacy, and affected stakeholders before the project even gets off the ground.
It forces the conversation early.
Exactly. It turns ethics committee oversight from a panicked ad hoc meeting into a literal pre-deployment workflow.
IBM did something very similar with their responsible technology board, didn't they?
Yeah.
They mapped out clear decision rights and escalation paths.
Yeah, I call that the fire drill protocol. If the building is actively on fire, you don't convene a committee to debate the thermodynamics of the flames.
When do you get out?
Right. Everyone needs to know in advance exactly who pulls the alarm, who is authorized to call the fire department, and who guides people out. Your AI governance model has to be that explicit.
Because the damage from unregulated AI happens incredibly fast. And it can be deeply systemic. We've seen major compliance flashpoints around this. Amazon, for example, had an experimental AI recruiting tool that they eventually had to scrap because they discovered it was actively disadvantaging female candidates.
Right.
The system had been trained on a decade of historical resumes, which were, predominantly from men.
And it wasn't explicitly programmed to be biased,
Right.
but AI holds a mirror up to the past. If you don't contain it, it just mathematically scales your historical inequities.
We saw a similar controversy with the Apple Card, where New York regulators had to investigate claims of gender-based credit limit disparities. Now, just to be very clear to you, our listener, we are simply reporting on the historical events from our research stack here. We are not taking sides or weighing in on the politics of those specific investigations at all.
Of course.
But the executive takeaway is that algorithmic decision-making can instantly become a massive, brand-damaging compliance nightmare.
Which is exactly why you have to prioritize containment. The mantra should be ban first, build safe. Containment is a form of ethical gatekeeping. Think of a safe deposit box.
Okay, I'm with you.
You wouldn't take your company's most valuable intellectual property out of a secure vault and sort through it on a park bench just because the lighting is a little better.
But that is exactly what happens when well-meaning employees copy and paste sensitive financial data or proprietary code into an open public AI chatbot just to save themselves 20 minutes of work.
Exactly. Look at Samsung. They had a major incident where employees uploaded highly sensitive proprietary information to a public generative AI tool. The data was just out in the wild.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Samsung had to urgently restrict access to these tools across their networks because they realized they didn't have basic data boundaries in place.
But if you just ban everything, aren't you stifling innovation? Your competitors are going to leapfrog you while you're figuring out your policies.
Well, banning is step one. It's not the final destination. Look at JP Morgan's trajectory. When ChatGPT first exploded onto the scene, JP Morgan was one of the first major banks to outright ban access to it on their corporate networks.
Right, they locked it down.
But they used that containment period to build safe enablement. They eventually rolled out their own internal LLM suite.
Yeah.
It's a secure, walled-off, large language model environment where employees could get all the productivity benefits of AI, but the data never left the bank's servers. That is how you manage the boundary effectively.
You build a secure playground. But even then, how do you get employees to actually use the secure playground instead of sneaking around it? I mean, compliance has to be livable. If the secure internal tool requires 15 logins and runs at half speed, people will just use their phones.
That is where you have to ritualize the adoption. You have to bake the correct behaviors into the everyday habits of the organization. Accenture has a brilliant strategy for this. They didn't just mandate a bunch of boring corporate training videos on AI safety.
Nobody watches those.
Well, they actually linked leadership promotion considerations to the active, responsible use of internal AI tools.
Wow. So if you want a promotion, you have to prove you are using the approved tools safely and effectively. That turns policy into a daily ritual.
It functions like a neighborhood watch program. A neighborhood watch works because people are actively engaged, looking out for the community and sharing information, not because they read a pamphlet once. You create internal communities of practice. You host office hours. You share libraries of safe, effective AI prompts. You make the right thing to do the easiest thing to do.
That's incredibly practical. So let's synthesize all of this for you, the leader listening right now. Integrating AI into your enterprise is not simply an IT initiative. It is a massive structural psychological shift. To navigate it, you first have to acknowledge the primal, ancient fear of exclusion that your employees are feeling. You have to build them a bridge to the future so they don't panic and sabotage the rollout.
Yes.
Then you establish crystal clear risk tiers, separating the vitamins from the surgeries. And finally, you have to build a durable governance model that relies on proportional enforcement and secure internal tooling.
That's the blueprint. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, and it ties right back to the Eden narrative we started with. We've established that boundaries, the gates of Eden, are necessary to protect the tribe and maintain psychological safety. But as we deploy more advanced AI, these systems aren't just going to be tools we use, they are going to become the monitors of our behavior.
Wait, what do you mean?
What happens when the AI becomes the gatekeeper? When an algorithm is the thing monitoring your Slack channels, analyzing your code commits, and instantly flagging you for straying outside the corporate kitchen rules.
Oh, wow.
If the AI becomes the enforcer of, that's not how we do it here, does that perfectly optimize our governance, or does it trigger a completely new kind of psychological panic? Navigating that tension between automated enforcement and human leadership is going to be the defining challenge of the next decade.
Thanks for listening to the Reflect podcast, where we're telling the future. Are you in it? Visit reflectpodcast.com and share your story.
In the cyber ocean of online voices and recycled content, something different has arrived. Reflect isn't just another podcast, it's the future of storytelling, powered entirely by AI. From curating data to assembling thought-provoking ideas, we've redefined how journeys are told. Reflect is a podcast that thinks, learns, and evolves with each episode. Every tale, every insight, crafted by the most advanced AI technologies. A podcast that disrupts the industry, breaking free from traditional formats, taking you on an entirely new experience. So tune in now and reflect. We're telling the future.